Keanu Reeves walked quietly into a famous luxury restaurant. He wasn't wearing fancy clothes. He had on a plain black t-shirt, jeans, and simple shoes. His hair was tied back in a loose ponytail. He looked very normal, like any other person. On the street, there was no bodyguard, no assistant, and no one to announce his arrival. He just wanted a peaceful meal. The restaurant was beautiful and full of rich customers. The tables were covered with white cloths, shiny silverware, and fresh flowers. A soft piano played in the background. Waiters rushed from table to table, giving special attention to every guest. Near the entrance stood a new waiter who was still learning but already felt confident. When he saw Keanu walking in, he frowned. In his mind, Keanu didn't look like someone who belonged in such an expensive place. The waiter thought, "Who is this guy? He looks like he got lost. He must have come to the wrong place." As Keanu approached, the waiter blocked his way slightly and said, "Good evening, sir. Are you sure you want to dine here? We have a strict dress code." His tone was cold, almost rude. He looked at Keanu's simple clothes and gave a small, sarcastic smile. Keanu stayed calm and polite. "Yes, I know. I'd like a table for one, please," he said gently. The waiter sighed loudly, clearly showing he was annoyed. He didn't offer a warm welcome. Instead, he quickly grabbed a menu and led Keanu to a small table near the kitchen door, the least desirable place in the entire restaurant. Other guests noticed what was happening. Some recognized Keanu but stayed silent, curious about what he would do. Keanu sat down quietly and smiled. He didn't complain. He thanked the waiter politely as he handed over the menu. Even though the waiter's behavior was cold and disrespectful, the waiter walked away, shaking his head and muttering to himself. He went back to the other staff and said quietly, "Can you believe this guy? Coming in dressed like that? He looks like he doesn't belong here at all." Some staff members looked shocked. A few of them recognized Keanu, but they hesitated. The waiter was new, and maybe he simply didn't know who Keanu was. Meanwhile, Keanu looked around the restaurant calmly. He wasn't upset. He didn't seem angry at all. Instead, he sat comfortably, enjoying the peaceful music and atmosphere. He waited patiently as the waiter took a long time to return. When the waiter finally came back, he spoke without warmth. "What do you want to order?" His tone was rushed and unfriendly. Keanu smiled kindly. "Just a simple pasta dish, please." "And water," he said. That the waiter didn't say thank you. He just took the order and walked away quickly. Other waiters noticed how patient Keanu was. They whispered among themselves, wondering why he wasn't saying anything. One waiter whispered to another, "That's Keanu Reeves. Why is he sitting there quietly and letting that waiter treat him like that?" But nobody stepped in. Keanu didn't seem to care about the poor service or the bad attitude. He looked calm and peaceful, as if nothing could bother him. His face showed kindness, not anger. Nearby guests who had realized who he was started watching closely. They were amazed that a famous actor like Keanu would tolerate such disrespect without making a scene. The new waiter, still clueless, felt proud of himself for treating this ordinary-looking man like a nobody. He thought he had done the right thing by seating him away from the important guests, but what he didn't know was that Keanu wasn't just any customer. There was something about this situation that he completely missed, something that was about to shock not just him, but the entire restaurant. Keanu continued to sit quietly, waiting for his food, smiling gently at other guests who looked his way. His peaceful nature made people respect him even more. Some guests wanted to tell the waiter who this man really was, but they stayed silent, curious to see what would happen next. The atmosphere in the restaurant slowly changed. Even though everything seemed normal on the surface, many guests could feel the tension. Everyone was waiting to see how this unusual situation would unfold. And still, Keanu stayed calm, proving once again that kindness and patience are more powerful than pride or anger. The waiter walked back to the kitchen after taking Keanu's order, still shaking his head. He whispered again to a fellow staff member, "That man doesn't look like he belongs here. Just look at him, sitting there like it's some cheap diner." But what the waiter didn't know was that a few of the other staff members recognized Keanu Reeves. They whispered quietly among themselves, unsure if they should say something. One staff member said softly, "I think that's Keanu Reeves, you know, the actor." The others nodded nervously but did not dare to speak up in front of the rude waiter. Meanwhile, Keanu sat quietly at his small table near the kitchen door. Every time the kitchen staff opened the door, he could hear loud noises and smell the cooking oils. This was the worst seat in the entire restaurant, but he didn't complain. Instead, he sat peacefully, his hands resting on the table, enjoying the soft piano music in the distance. A few diners nearby kept stealing glances at him. Some whispered to each other, amazed that this famous man was being treated so poorly. They couldn't understand why Keanu wasn't saying anything, why he didn't ask to be moved or call for the manager. As time passed, the rude waiter delayed bringing Keanu's food. He served other tables first, even those who had arrived later. He acted as if Keanu didn't matter at all. When he finally brought the glass of water, he placed it on the table carelessly, and some water spilled. He didn't even apologize. Keanu simply smiled gently and wiped the water with a napkin himself. Other waiters noticed everything. They felt uncomfortable but stayed quiet. They were confused by Keanu's calm behavior. A customer at the next table leaned over and said softly to Keanu, "Excuse me, aren't you Keanu Reeves?" Keanu gave a small, friendly smile and replied politely, "Yes, I am." The customer smiled back but didn't say more, respecting Keanu's peaceful nature. Even though this person recognized him, no one else at the table called out or made a scene. But inside, they were all shocked that Keanu was being treated so poorly. Back at the waiter's station, the rude waiter laughed quietly to himself. "He probably can't even afford this place," he whispered, without realizing how wrong he was. Keanu waited patiently. The food was still not coming. The waiter walked past him several times, ignoring his table completely. Each time their eyes met, the waiter looked away quickly, pretending not to notice him. It was as if the waiter had made up his mind that Keanu didn't deserve proper service just because of his simple clothes and quiet behavior. But what he didn't understand was that Keanu had seen this kind of attitude many times before. He had experienced people judging him by his appearance. Yet, Keanu always chose patience and kindness over anger. Finally, after a long wait, the waiter brought Keanu's plate of pasta. He placed it down quickly and without a word. No smile. No "enjoy your meal." No kindness at all. Keanu thanked him politely anyway. He picked up his fork and began eating slowly, enjoying each bite. Even though the service had been so poor. In the kitchen, the staff started talking. A chef said to one of the waiters, "Isn't that Keanu Reeves? Why is he sitting there? Why is no one treating him properly?" The waiter whispered back, "The new guy doesn't know who he is. And now, I think it's too late to fix this." Quietly, everyone was watching from the corner of their eyes. The atmosphere in the restaurant was strange now. Guests who had recognized Keanu were also quietly observing everything. Some were shocked. Some were smiling softly, admiring his patience. At this point, even the manager, who had been away for a few minutes, returned to the restaurant. As he walked in, he immediately noticed Keanu sitting near the kitchen. His heart skipped a beat. He could tell something was wrong. The manager quickly asked a waiter, "Why is he sitting there? Why was he seated at that table?" The waiter hesitated and then explained what had happened. Pointing towards the new waiter, the manager's expression changed instantly. He knew this was serious. He knew Keanu very well, not just as a customer, but because there was something much more important about his connection to this restaurant. Without wasting a second, the manager rushed towards Keanu's table, his face full of concern. The rude waiter watched from a distance, confused and wondering why the manager suddenly looked so alarmed. Keanu continued to eat quietly, completely calm, as if nothing unusual was happening. But the moment of truth was about to come. The manager was about to say something that would shock everyone, including the rude waiter, and change the entire atmosphere of the restaurant. The manager walked quickly through the restaurant, heading straight toward Keanu's table. His heart was racing, and his mind was full of worry. As he got closer, he could see that Keanu was sitting calmly, quietly eating his pasta, as if he didn't notice the poor service at all. But the manager knew this was a serious situation. The waiter who had been rude watched from a distance, confused by the manager's sudden concern. He didn't understand why this guest was so important. When the manager finally reached the table, he bent down slightly and spoke softly but with deep respect. "Sir, please forgive us. I am truly sorry for the way you've been treated. This is not how we serve our guests here," he said. Keanu looked up at the manager with a kind smile and said gently, "It's all right, I'm fine. No need for trouble." But the manager couldn't stay silent. He glanced around and saw that many guests and staff were watching. Some looked shocked. Others whispered quietly, trying to understand what was going on. Then the manager stood up straight and, in a calm but clear voice, said something that made the entire restaurant pause. "This gentleman sitting here is not just a guest," he said. "He is the owner of this restaurant." For a moment, there was complete silence. The rude waiter froze in place, his face turning pale. He couldn't believe what he had just heard. Other staff members stared at each other, wide-eyed. Guests who had been watching gasped softly, surprised by this unexpected truth. The waiter's mouth opened slightly as if he wanted to speak, but no words came out. His mind raced, replaying everything he had done since Keanu walked through the door. All the rude words, the cold attitude, seating him near the kitchen, all of it suddenly felt like a terrible mistake. Keanu remained seated, still smiling kindly, as if he wasn't affected at all. He didn't act like a powerful owner or a famous actor. He just sat there quietly, finishing his meal. While the truth sank in around the room, the manager looked directly at the waiter and said firmly, "This is Mr. Keanu Reeves. He has a stake in this restaurant. He helped us build this place to be what it is today, and you have shown him no respect." The waiter lowered his head, feeling embarrassed and nervous. His hands trembled slightly as he realized who Keanu really was. At the nearby tables, guests started whispering louder. Many admired Keanu even more. Not only was he a famous actor, but he was also an owner of this beautiful restaurant. And yet he had accepted poor treatment with such grace. A few guests nodded respectfully toward Keanu. Others smiled at him quietly, impressed by his patience and humility. The waiter finally gathered enough courage to step forward. His voice was shaky as he spoke. "Sir, I'm so sorry, I didn't know. Please forgive me." Keanu looked up again, his eyes calm and gentle. He didn't seem angry or upset. Instead, he spoke softly, "It's all right. But remember, always treat everyone kindly, no matter how they look or who you think they are. That's what really matters." These words touched everyone in the restaurant. Even the guests felt like they had learned an important lesson in that moment. The manager thanked Keanu for his kindness and immediately offered to move him to a better table, the best seat in the house, but Keanu simply smiled and said, "No need. I'm fine right here." His calm response made the staff and guests respect him even more. The waiter, still embarrassed, quietly stepped back. He realized that this day would stay with him forever, a day when he judged someone by appearance and learned a powerful lesson. Because of it, the restaurant's atmosphere slowly changed. What started as an ordinary evening had now turned into a moment everyone would remember. Keanu continued to eat his pasta peacefully as if nothing had happened. But inside, every staff member and guest was thinking about what they had just witnessed. A simple, powerful reminder that kindness and respect should be given to everyone. As the piano continued to play softly, the manager gave instructions to the staff to make sure everything was perfect for the rest of Keanu's meal. Other waiters rushed quietly to ensure no further mistakes were made. Keanu didn't want any special treatment now. He just wanted a peaceful evening, and despite everything that had happened, he remained gentle and kind, showing once again why so many people admired him, not just for his fame, but for the way he treated others. After the manager made the shocking announcement that Keanu Reeves was the owner of the restaurant, the atmosphere completely changed. The waiter who had been rude stood frozen, unable to look Keanu in the eyes. His face was pale, his heart beating fast. He had never felt so embarrassed in his life. Meanwhile, Keanu continued sitting calmly at his table near the kitchen door. He didn't act like a powerful owner or a rich celebrity. He still looked peaceful, almost as if nothing unusual had happened. Manager leaned down again and quietly asked, "Sir, may I move you to a better table? The one near the window is waiting for you. It's our best seat." Keanu smiled gently and shook his head. "No, thank you. I'm comfortable here." "Please, don't worry," he said softly. His words surprised the manager. Most people in Keanu's position would have demanded the best table and perfect service, but Keanu's calm nature was different. He cared more about peace than attention. The other guests in the restaurant whispered among themselves, watching every moment. They admired how patient and humble Keanu was being, even after being treated poorly. Some even felt guilty for not speaking up earlier when they saw how the waiter was treating him. The rude waiter slowly walked over to the manager, his voice low. "I didn't know. I didn't recognize him," he whispered. The manager replied quietly but firmly, "That's the problem. It shouldn't matter whether you recognize him or not. Every guest deserves respect." The waiter nodded, feeling ashamed. He knew he had failed in his job, not just as a waiter, but as a human being. Keanu noticed their conversation but didn't interrupt. Instead, he simply continued eating his pasta slowly, enjoying every bite. His kindness and calmness spoke louder than any angry words could. At another table, a family who had been watching closely smiled warmly at Keanu. Their little child waved at him shyly. Keanu smiled back and gave a small wave, making the child's face light up with joy. In the kitchen, the staff whispered about what had just happened. A chef said softly, "Did you see how kind he was?" Even though the waiter was rude, he stayed peaceful the whole time. Another waiter added, "That's why people love him. He treats everyone kindly." The restaurant, which had felt tense just moments ago, now felt different. There was a sense of respect and warmth spreading among everyone. The guests and staff had learned something valuable, that real kindness doesn't come from money or fame, but from how you treat others, no matter who they are. The rude waiter, still embarrassed, couldn't stop thinking about his mistake. He remembered how he had judged Keanu from the moment he walked in, just because he was wearing simple clothes. He had thought Keanu didn't fit in this fancy place. But now, he realized how wrong he had been. He walked back to Keanu's table, took a deep breath, and spoke honestly. "Sir, I'm truly sorry for how I treated you. It was wrong. I hope you can forgive me." Keanu looked at him gently. He didn't raise his voice or look angry. Instead, he spoke kindly. "It's all right. I forgive you," he said softly. "Just remember, everyone deserves respect, no matter what they wear or how they look." Those simple words touched the waiter deeply. He nodded gratefully and promised himself he would never treat anyone that way again. At the same time, The other staff members quietly made sure Keanu's meal continued smoothly. The manager instructed them to serve him with care but not to overwhelm him with attention. As Keanu clearly didn't want a fuss, guests continued glancing at Keanu, impressed by how he had handled everything with such grace. Some even shared stories at their tables about how they had heard similar things about Keanu before, that he was known for being humble and kind in real life. As Keanu finished his meal, he sat back in his chair for a moment, looking peaceful and content. The music from the piano filled the room softly, creating a calm and elegant atmosphere. Though Keanu didn't ask for special treatment, he had taught everyone in that restaurant a quiet but powerful lesson that night. Never judge people by their appearance, and always treat others with kindness. And even though the evening had begun with disrespect and misunderstanding, it was ending with respect, warmth, and reflection. As the evening continued, the mood in the restaurant felt softer and calmer. Keanu Reeves still sat quietly at his table near the kitchen door, but now almost everyone in the restaurant knew who he was. Some guests tried to avoid staring, while others smiled warmly in his direction, impressed by how peaceful and polite he had remained all this time. The waiter who had been rude earlier stood near the side, feeling a heavy weight on his heart. He kept thinking about his mistake, and even though Keanu had already forgiven him, the guilt remained strong. He had judged a man just because of his simple clothes and calm attitude, without realizing who he truly was. In a small corner near the kitchen, a few staff members whispered. One of them said quietly, "Did you see how Mr. Reeves stayed so calm? He could have shouted. He could have asked for the waiter to be fired. But he didn't." Another staff member nodded and replied, "He's teaching all of us something." Tonight, that real respect isn't about power or position. It's about kindness. The manager moved carefully around the restaurant, checking every detail. He wanted to make sure nothing else went wrong during Keanu's visit, but deep down, he also felt a mix of pride and shame. Pride because Keanu was such a humble owner, and shame because this embarrassing situation had happened in front of so many people. Keanu, on the other hand, didn't seem bothered at all. He took his time, enjoying each bite of his meal. His face stayed relaxed, and he smiled gently at anyone who made eye contact with him. At one point, a small child from a nearby table walked over to him shyly, holding a crayon drawing she had made. Without hesitation, Keanu bent down, smiled warmly, and said softly, "That's beautiful. Thank you for this gift." He accepted the drawing as if it were the most precious thing in the world. The child's face lit up, and her parents smiled with gratitude. Even this simple moment made the guests respect Keanu even more. He wasn't acting like a celebrity. He wasn't showing off his fame or power. He was just being kind, patient, and gentle. Even after the rude treatment he had received earlier, the waiter who had insulted Keanu continued watching from a distance, feeling a mix of regret and sadness. He thought about how quickly he had judged Keanu and how wrongly he had acted. In his mind, he promised himself that he would never treat another person that way again. Finally, Keanu finished his meal. He placed his fork down quietly and took a sip of water. Then he sat back, looking thoughtful but peaceful. The manager quickly approached him again, bending slightly and speaking respectfully. "Sir, may I offer you dessert on the house? Anything you like, as a small apology." Keanu gave a soft smile and shook his head gently. "No, thank you. I've enjoyed my meal. That's enough for me," he said kindly. But just before the manager could leave, Keanu spoke again. His voice was soft but clear. "You know, sometimes mistakes happen, but what matters is how we learn from them. Please tell your team that I appreciate them. And please remind them, treat every guest with kindness, because you never know who that person might be." The manager nodded respectfully, his heart touched by these simple but wise words. He knew that this was not just advice for his staff, but a lesson that applied to everyone. Keanu then quietly reached into his pocket and pulled out some money for the waiter's tip. Even after everything that had happened, he left a generous tip, far more than expected. He stood up slowly, ready to leave. The entire restaurant seemed to fall into a respectful silence. Guests watched as Keanu walked past their tables, still smiling gently. Some guests nodded toward him, silently thanking him for the lesson he had shared without anger or pride. The rude waiter, now deeply ashamed but grateful for Keanu's forgiveness, stepped forward one last time. His voice was soft and full of emotion as he said, "Thank you, sir, for your kindness." Keanu simply placed a gentle hand on the waiter's shoulder and said, "Take care of yourself." And with that, he walked toward the door, moving quietly and humbly, just as he had entered. But even though Keanu left without saying much, his quiet dignity left a deep impression on everyone. The guests, the waiters, the manager, and especially the one waiter who had treated him poorly, all felt they had witnessed something important that night. It wasn't about fame or ownership. It wasn't about getting revenge for bad service. It was about kindness. After Keanu walked out of the restaurant, the whole place remained quiet for a moment. It was almost as if everyone was thinking about what they had just seen. The waiter who had treated him so rudely felt deeply embarrassed. He sat down quietly near the back, holding his head in his hands, going over everything in his mind again. And again, other staff members slowly returned to their work, but they couldn't stop whispering about what had happened. "Can you believe it?" One waiter said softly. "He owns this place. And he didn't even say a word when he was treated so badly." A chef nearby replied, "That's the kind of person he is. Calm, patient, humble." Even the guests continued talking among themselves. Many of them felt moved by Keanu's quiet dignity. He hadn't raised his voice, hadn't demanded anything, and yet he had taught everyone a lesson just by the way he behaved. The manager stood near the entrance, still feeling ashamed that this had happened in his restaurant. He looked over at the waiter who had insulted Keanu and walked over slowly. The waiter looked up, his eyes full of guilt. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I should never have treated anyone like that." The manager sat down beside him and spoke gently. "Yes, you made a mistake. But what matters now is that you learn from it. Did you see how Mr. Reeves responded? He stayed calm, polite, and kind, even when you were disrespectful. That's a lesson not just for you, but for all of us." The waiter nodded slowly. He felt grateful that he was being given a chance to reflect and improve. He promised himself that from that day forward, he would treat every single guest with respect, no matter how they looked or what they wore. Later that evening, after the restaurant had closed and the last guest had left, the staff gathered together for a short meeting. The manager decided to speak honestly to the team. "I want all of you to remember tonight," he began. "We saw a guest treated poorly because of assumptions, and that guest turned out to be our own owner, Mr. Keanu Reeves. But even more important than that, we saw how he responded with patience and kindness. This is the kind of attitude we should all have no matter who the guest is." Everyone listened carefully. Some staff members nodded thoughtfully, while others felt a bit embarrassed, remembering that they too had stayed silent when they saw the waiter being rude. One waiter raised her hand and said quietly, "We all judged him too, even if we didn't say anything. We didn't stand up or stop the poor service. But he didn't hold it against us. He just stayed kind. That says a lot about him." The manager agreed. "Exactly. Kindness isn't just about what we say when things are easy. It's about how we act even when things go wrong. Mr. Reeves showed us that tonight." The rude waiter then stood up in front of everyone. His voice was soft but clear as he spoke. "I want to apologize to all of you, and I want to thank you for not turning your backs on me. I made a mistake, but I promise I will never treat anyone that way again. I will respect every guest equally, whether they are rich, famous, or look like they just walked in from the street. The team gave him a few supportive nods. They understood that everyone makes mistakes, and they could see that he was truly sorry. That night, as everyone cleaned the restaurant and prepared to leave, they all felt different than usual. There was a quiet understanding among them, a shared feeling that they had learned something valuable. They realized that respect and kindness should never depend on a person's appearance. Keanu's quiet example had changed them. Outside the restaurant, a soft breeze blew through the night. The streetlights glowed gently, and for a moment, the world felt peaceful. Keanu, somewhere far from the restaurant now, probably didn't even think much about what had happened. He had simply gone home after a quiet meal. But without even trying, he had touched the hearts of everyone who had seen his calm and kind behavior. The staff knew that from now on, things would be different. They would treat every guest with the same care, no matter what. And every time they saw someone walk through the door, they would remember the night Keanu Reeves taught them a lesson, not through anger or orders, but through simple kindness. Days passed after that unforgettable night at the restaurant, but people were still talking about what had happened. The story spread among the staff, the regular customers, and even to people outside. Some staff shared the story with their families and friends, amazed at what they had witnessed. The rude waiter who had insulted Keanu became thoughtful and quiet in the days that followed. He worked hard to change his attitude. Now whenever a guest walked through the door, no matter how they dressed or looked, he welcomed them warmly with a smile. He checked their needs carefully and served them with respect. He wanted to prove that he had learned from his mistake. The manager noticed the change too. He saw how the waiter treated everyone kindly and with patience. The staff as a whole began treating all guests better, inspired by the simple but powerful example Keanu had set. Regular guests who had witnessed that night also treated the staff with more kindness. It was as if the lesson Keanu had taught was not only for the workers, but for everyone who had been there. Even guests who hadn't been there heard about the story. Some came in and quietly asked, "Is it true? Did Keanu Reeves really come here and sit at that little table near the kitchen?" When they heard the story from the staff, they smiled and felt touched by Keanu's humility. The little table near the kitchen, where Keanu had chosen to remain seated, became special. Many guests actually requested to sit there, calling it Keanu's table. It reminded them of the importance of kindness and respect. Meanwhile, the waiter who had made the mistake began to feel proud of his change. He no longer judged anyone by their appearance. If an older man came in wearing simple clothes, he welcomed him kindly. If a young woman arrived alone looking nervous, he offered a warm smile and asked how he could help. He remembered Keanu's words every day. Treat everyone with kindness, no matter how they look or who you think they are. This lesson didn't just stay inside the restaurant. The waiter carried it into his life outside work too. When he traveled on buses, he offered his seat to older people. When he saw someone struggling with heavy bags, he helped without hesitation. His small actions made his days better and made others smile. One evening, weeks later, the waiter stood quietly by the restaurant door, remembering that night again. He wondered if Keanu would ever return. Part of him hoped he would, so that he could personally serve him again, but this time with the respect he deserved from the start. The manager walked over to the waiter and smiled gently. "You've done well," he said kindly. "I can see the difference in you. You've grown from this experience." The waiter nodded humbly. "It's because of him," he replied. "He didn't get angry or shout. He taught me through his calmness. I'll always remember that." At that moment, a family entered the restaurant, a man, a woman, and their 2 children. The waiter greeted them warmly, just as he had promised himself he would greet every guest from then on. As he showed them to a table, he felt proud that he was now part of the restaurant's change. Somewhere far from the restaurant, Keanu Reeves was living his quiet life. probably unaware of how much his patience and kindness had transformed this little place. He hadn't needed to give a long speech or demand respect. His simple, humble example had been enough. The restaurant continued to thrive. Guests felt comfortable, welcomed, and respected no matter who they were or what they wore. The staff worked together with a new sense of pride. Every day when the waiter passed by the little table, near the kitchen, the same table he had once used to insult a guest, he felt a quiet reminder of his journey. That table was no longer just a seat near the kitchen. It was a symbol of change, humility, and respect. The story of that night remained in people's hearts, not because of drama or anger, but because of one man's kindness, and so life went on, but the lesson stayed. Never judge someone by their appearance, and always treat others with kindness. Because you never know who that person might be, and sometimes, even the most ordinary-looking guest might just turn out to be someone extraordinary.